Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new edition of KerVAM, a Doctor Who podcast where we are kind of concluding our discussions on season 2 of Doctor Who, the Ncuti Gatwa era as a whole. We've, of course, spent the last couple of months or so discussing in depth every episode of this season, whether it's been a fun experience or not for all of us, and certainly the last couple of weeks it's not been so fun. And so it felt a right time, maybe it wasn't expected a month ago, but we're now discussing the whole of the Ncuti Gatwa era because it's over, it's done, it's ended. We saw him regenerate at the end of the Reality War, and so we're going to be covering off and just sharing our overall thoughts on these two seasons, what's worked about them, what hasn't, what we've enjoyed, where the show's at, and what the future of the show is going to look like as well. So Charlie, I think I'll come to you first today. We've had 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks to think about it after the end of the Reality War. What's your kind of overriding feelings about this era as a whole now that we've reached its conclusion?
It's a big question. It's a huge question. I don't really know. I think there's a lot of negativity at the moment, and I feel like it's a habit of Doctor Who fans in general to base their opinion of the entire era and the season based on the last episode they saw, which is in this case a pretty bad episode. But overall, it's a weird era to think about because we're still kind of in it, and I feel like it'll be a lot less biased once we're 1 or 2 years out of it, and we're truly just because the dust hasn't really settled yet. We don't really know what's happening. It still feels like we're in the midst of it, but underrated, I guess. It feels weird saying that, but generally, like, I feel like while there were larger kind of creative issues going on, and the whole Disney deal just I feel like never should have happened. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
The issue obviously being that the Disney deal basically caused Ncuti to leave, and that's why we have an era that's 18 episodes long, which is obviously the shortest number of episodes for a Doctor behind Eccleston, and I mean kind of Paul McGann, I guess, and David Tennant as 14, but I'm kind of not counting them for obvious reasons. In terms of Doctors who've had a proper era, he is the second shortest amount of episodes, which is a problem because unlike Eccleston, he didn't fall out with Russell. It was a simple kind of, not wanting to sit on his hands and wait for another season to be announced. And the fact that the Disney deal existed is kind of the reason why that happened, and we didn't get like season 3 and 4 of Ncuti, because I feel like that would have happened and we would have had like 4 seasons if it wasn't for this. But it's a kind of like, it feels almost the bad things about Moffat's era were kind of even worse here, in the sense that we have these really weird convoluted season arcs that kind of make no sense and have a really bad conclusion, whereas the actual episode to episode basis, it's pretty good. Like, I feel like in last year's season and this year's season, we've had like pretty amazing runs of episodes where it's like a solid 5 episodes in a row that are really good. And even the first parts of both finales were great as an episode. Obviously, kind of redundant now we have the second part, and they're not very good. But if we look at season 1, we've got Boom, 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble, Rogue, all pretty great, really. I'd say all 8 out of 10 or above for those. And then in season 2, we obviously have Lux, The Well, Lucky Day, Story in the Engine, and Interstellar Song Contest. And I didn't love Story in the Engine, but generally speaking, both of these runs of episodes, which obviously are, entire half of the season or more, are really good. So I feel like as an actual episodic kind of monster of the week kind of thing, it's very good, but it's just kind of Russell trying too hard to make these weird series arcs and bring back past villains. And I feel like the main sort of 2 words to describe Russell at the moment is sort of creatively bankrupt, in that it's just kind of Doctor Who's a show that's kind of self-cannibalizing, and it can't create new things, and it's just recycling constantly these. I mean, Omega and the Rani. Like, I feel like in season 3 we would have just had, if it existed, obviously with Ncuti and all of that, we would have just had a whole Susan Time Hotel finale where I don't know, the Doctor battles like Syl or something who tries to resurrect Rassilon, and it just feels like that all over again. And it just for me, Moffat was always the one to kind of his biggest flaw was these weird convoluted series arcs, and Russell was the one who kind of did the finales a bit better even, and his finales were the best really because I think 1, 2, and 4 were pretty great,
Yeah.
and three wasn't even that bad. But now Russell's kind of the one that's sort of infamous for these finales and all these convoluted plots. And it's a real shame because I feel like if we did have 12 or 13 episode seasons, then they kind of would have been forgotten a little bit better because they wouldn't be literally a quarter of the entire season like they are. And so, like, just it's a shame because it makes it sours the season because everyone just remembers the last episode they saw the most.
Yeah.
Then sadly, it's the reality war, and we're going to have the reality war being the most recent episode of Doctor Who for like 2 years,
Yeah.
which is a shame. So yeah, I mean, we can talk more episode to episode later, but generally speaking, underrated in the sense that the stories themselves, on average, are good, but kind of each season seems to be less than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting because I feel like if we think about the Chibnall era, just because it's the previous era to compare against, I think you couldn't even say that a lot of the stories were very good in the Chibnall era. There was many problems with the Chibnall era, but the episodes themselves just weren't that good a lot of the time. We'd probably say that more than half of the Ncuti Gatwa era episodes are quite good, are pretty decent episodes of Doctor Who. Like out of 18, there's probably 10 or 11 of them we'd say, yeah, they're pretty good. I kind of enjoy those. Whereas I don't feel like you'd say there's more than 50% of the Chibnall era episodes that you'd say are pretty good Doctor Who. Like I just don't think that happened. And so it sort of feels like the Chibnall era is completely different to everything else. And I can see its appeal to some degree, and there are good things about it. Whereas RTD2 just feels a kind of like a worse version of RTD1. Like he's taken a step back. Like it's like his writing ability and the creative ideas that he have kind of regressed in 20 years since he was writing for it in 2005 to the point where he's almost a parody of himself. I particularly the clip from Doctor Unleashed of him talking about a companion called Petrol that I just thought was the most just. I mean, it's hilarious, but it's like, how is he not self-aware of how he comes across when he does interviews like that? It just shows, I think, he doesn't have anybody reining in his ideas, which is like, because it doesn't, to me, you're trying to relaunch this show for a new era, a new audience. The show's struggling after the Chibnall era. It's been going for 20 years. Like, there's some audience fatigue generally. You've got to try and do something new. The answer is not to put Sutek in your Series 1 finale and the Rani and Omega in your Series 2 finale. Like, that just doesn't engage an audience. That people don't care. They're not going to come back and go, whoa, Sutek. No one knows who it is. Like, I just think there's so many decisions like that have been such a failure for this era and have really let it down. Whereas, as you say, Charlie, there's so many good episodes in there. Boom's great, 73 Yards is great, Dot and Bubble, Lux is brilliant as well. There's loads of great ones there, but it's so hard to see past an episode like Space Babies or an episode like Empire of Death or The Reality War. So I don't know, Bill, where are you kind of landing on the Ncuti Gatwa era at the moment?
I feel like it is difficult because, as Charlie was saying, like we're barely out of it really, so it's still very much early days yet. But I feel like it's just been so short, and I think
Yeah,
like it's that I think is the main issue is if you're going to do 8 episode seasons, then I feel like there needed to be kind of it feels like there needs to be more of a like a solid plan of what was going to happen. Like I know some of this is kind of like it's easy to say this now with the benefit of hindsight, knowing that Shooty's now left after 2 seasons when they probably didn't think that was going to happen,
no,
like when they first wrote season one.
yeah,
Um, they probably thought he was at least going to do his standard 3 seasons, maybe four, and then move on. It just it is just a really strange era because, like, as you say, like on an episode by episode basis, it's really pretty strong, really solid. Like the majority of the episodes on their own are very, very good and really good Doctor Who. It's just that the kind of wider kind of side of this era, just something somewhere along the way has just gone wrong somewhere where it's like it's not even the fact that like yeah, maybe it probably wasn't the smartest idea to have people like Sutek and Omega come back, but then it feels like if Russell really wanted to commit to that and wanted to commit to this like fantasy themed kind of era with all these gods and everything, it seems like he could have done something like really interesting with that, but it just feels like these gods, they get defeated so easily and so quickly.
Mm.
And it just seems like each of them could be like a big bad for the whole season, pretty much. And, that could be like, Maestro could have been behind everything in season one potentially or whatever. But then they just get defeated so easily in just one singular episode each. And then that's it. And then you just kind of like have like in season one, you have a lot of experimentation. So it's hard to really kind of say, like for a new audience, especially, it's hard for them to get a grasp of what on earth is Doctor Who? Like, what is a standard Doctor Who episode? It's not really there in for most of that season, I'd say. Like, I think probably the closest is like Rogue, maybe Boom in some ways, but even then, like, there's still things that they're both doing a bit differently.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it seemed like season two, up until the Reality War released, was I think kind of unintentionally having learned a few lessons from season one. Like I feel like it was, I think, a bit more accessible in that it was trying to be less about experimentation and more just about kind of focusing in on just telling good stories and good episodes for the majority of its run. And then this is just the tragedy is that obviously with both of these finales now, we've had all this build up and then there's no kind of satisfying payoff, which is really like frustrating because like Charlie says that's going to be what people are going to think of the most when they look back at this era are, the moments with Sutek getting defeated by being pulled on a leash in the time vortex,
Yeah.
Omega getting defeated by the Vindicator after appearing for what, 2 minutes, the Rani just getting eaten. It's like the really good stuff that is kind of going for it, but then the execution itself it just falls flat somewhere. And I
Mm.
think you could be right in terms of like maybe the reason why Russell's first era was the success it was not just because of Russell himself, but also the people that surrounded him, and people were kind of like they respected his vision, his creative vision, but they also kind of said, sometimes maybe you need to rein this back a bit, you need to just and I think maybe Russell was a bit more cautious, I think, back then. Whereas I think now, because he gains that kind of like fame from that first era and obviously done on do even more like amazing award-winning shows outside of Doctor Who since then. Um, it feels like people are a lot less kind of willing to say to him, look, maybe you should just kind of step back a bit and not kind of commit to that idea fully. And it just kind of seems like, in a way, he's just got a bunch of yes men now who just nod along with whatever he comes up with. And, some of his eras, some of the ideas he's come up with for this era have been very good. Like, I don't mind, having kind of musical-ish episodes of Doctor Who, like as a concept.
Mhm.
Um, it's just, yeah, I feel like there's an identity crisis, I think, going on with this era where it's trying to be like this successful relaunch of the show, trying to almost in a way get back to basics with it. But then it's also trying to just continue where the Chibnall era left off in just endlessly lore heavy, continuity heavy stuff going on in the background. I mean, the whole like yeah, it was great seeing the Fugitive Doctor again. It was great seeing the 13th Doctor again, but could you imagine like if those were your first episodes, like you've never seen Doctor Who before, you would be clueless as to who those characters are. Like, especially the fugitive doctor.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah.
It's just strange. Like, it feels like he should have just picked one rather than trying to do both at the same time. Like, I feel that's the main kind of issue I have with it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. And it's interesting because Chibnall kind of tried to do a new era and then everybody was kind of critical of it. And it's almost like he overcorrected and then went completely in the opposite direction and went really heavy lore. And then Russell's just kind of picked it up and run with it. And I just don't quite understand why he thinks it's the right direction for the show now and the way it's going. And it feels like the show's just lost a lot of the kind of character moments that were so great in RTD1. Like, probably Russell's greatest strength was his writing of characters and the relationships between the characters, developing the families of each of the companions, and really kind of making everything feel more real because you were grounding it in those real life characters like Mickey or Jackie or Martha's mum or Donna's mum and Wilf and all of that. Like, there's so many great, memorable family characters you think of there in RTD1. And okay, we've got Ruby's mum and Gran, but they have a few fun moments. But would we really say they're particularly like fantastic characters that like really provide some, great moments between them and Ruby and the Doctor and whatever? I don't really see that in this era in the same way. And obviously, we never really met Belinda's family at all, so there's no perspective on it there. So it feels like that's not quite worked. And I think what hasn't helped as well is there's clearly been a number of things that have happened behind the scenes that weren't what Russell originally planned it to be. Whether it be simple things like what I'm pretty sure the intention was to launch season 1 with the Church on Ruby Road and go straight into Space Babies. I don't see that Space Babies was designed as episode 1 of your new season relaunching the show, because it's just not designed for that. So I'm sure the original intention was to launch it on Christmas with Church on Ruby Road, then straight into Space Babies the next week, and that's kind of how your season starts. And I think that, for example, would have worked a lot better as a sort of jumping in point, because then people probably, miss the Christmas episode, then jump into Space Babies, go, that's terrible, and then don't bother anymore, because that's not the place to start. So I think that didn't help. Clearly, there's something gone on with Millie Gibson as to why she wasn't the companion in season 2, and why the storyline of the storyline of the reality war is designed for her to be in Belinda's position as the mother of that child. Completely, everything would make more sense if it was her. So clearly something has gone wrong there. And then, as we know, it was obviously not the intention for Ncuti Gatwa to leave. He was meant to stay on, and Disney not renewing the show has caused that to change, and that kind of wrecked a lot of the last episode, I think, and the direction that was taking. So it just feels like there's so many kind of, which, to be fair, we should probably not criticise Russell for necessarily. I don't see any of these things as particularly as RTD's fault. I feel like we're being quite critical of him, but some stuff is out of his control that's happened behind the scenes, which has impacted the show negatively. That, yeah, is just a shame that it's worked out that way, I think, and there's a variety of reasons for that. So Ryan, sorry it's taken so long, but we'll come to you now. What are you you've heard a lot of our discussions already, so what are you feeling? Where are the feelings of the Ncuti Gatwa era for you?
Oh boy, if I could sum it, I can sum it up all in 2 words.
Great.
Wasted potential. And that's just how I felt about this era, because I was coming into the Ncuti Gatwa era really hyped.
I agree.
Not gonna lie,
Same
into
here.
it hyped. I think Ncuti Gatwa is a charismatic actor. That man can charm a room easily, and was such a perfect pick for the Doctor. And to be fair, he has good support with Millie Gibson and Vara Desethu. You have really good actors, and you'd think, yeah, even though it's signed up with Disney, you'd think, well, they're getting a bigger budget. Maybe they're willing to go bigger and bolder than they've ever been before. It'll right the wrongs of the Chibnall era and all that. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna lie, starting off your era with singing goblins and talking babies is probably not the best way to start your era. Let's
Indeed.
be fair.
Yeah.
And that's related to what you said about an identity crisis, because you have those two, which are, let's be honest, are clearly aimed for kids.
Yeah.
They're definitely more aimed for children. I mean, they're my niece's favourite stories, those
There you
two,
go.
and you can see why. Kids can watch it, but the more older than that, they're probably going to be looking at this and be like, "This is a bit lame, isn't it?" And I honestly, I would tend to agree. And then after that, I won't be honest, from Devil's Cord up until Rogue, it was solid. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. It actually got me really hyped again in that consistent run. It's the most I've enjoyed Doctor Who since Series 10.
Yep.
That run from Devil's Court to Rogue, it was just absolutely fantastic, and it got me great. I was like, oh, this is really exciting. And then we got to the two-part finale, and I said it before, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the stuff with Sutek I thought was really good, but the whole, how they defeated Sutek, and especially everything to do with the Ruby mystery and over-explaining who the mystery, and she named the road after you, and it's just all that. It's that I'm never going to get over that. I was just
What was
not.
he thinking? What was Russell thinking? I'm sorry, but
That
I
bit.
just
Although,
can't. Yeah.
I thought there was nothing's going to beat that in terms of absolute WTF. Like, what were you thinking levels? But then he did. The reality war happened. What he did to Belinda at the end of that, and I will say this: if I was to look at these two seasons, I actually, looking back, I think the first season was the best season because
Okay.
whatever you may think of it, it doesn't feel like a mess. It felt mostly consistent. It felt like Russell pretty much managed to do what he wanted to do with it. I mean, obviously, Church and River Road, from what I've heard, the ending of that wasn't what we saw, wasn't the ending he had in mind originally. I think I heard some rumors like the ending of that got changed, the fight with the Goblin King. There was meant to be a different showdown with that, but and then obviously Millie Gibson, something clearly happened. I mean, you're right. She's clearly was meant to be for more than one season as the main companion. And obviously, who knows? Maybe they just wanted a different companion, or maybe Millie Gibson just didn't want to do it anymore, and so
Just
they
don't know.
had
Yeah.
to write her out at the end. But regardless, it doesn't feel like a mess. It did feel pretty consistent. Yes, I didn't love all of that first season, obviously. It didn't start out great and it didn't end super well, but it was pretty consistent. Second season, I've got to admit, looking back, it did feel like a mess, to be honest. It did feel pretty messy, from having to, probably with Millie Gibson leaving, they had to bring in a new companion and having to retool a lot of the stories to accommodate Belinda's presence, and starting her out brilliantly for the first 3 episodes she was in, and then after that they didn't know what to do with her after the well. She just kind of she mattered less and less, to the point where in the finale she's just stuck in a box for like most of it, and then she also got rewritten to be a mum twice, basically, almost without her consent, basically. And also, I felt like it was, in terms of stories, I felt there was a little bit less stories that I actually liked. I mean, I think from look to story and the engine, I think we're solid, definitely solid. Interstellar Song Contest, I'm not going to lie, looking back, I do think it's the Kill the Moon of the Ncuti Gatwa era. For me, looking back on it, I do see a lot of comparisons with Kill the Moon. I'm not going to lie. Robot Revolution, that's just all style and no substance. And obviously, the 2-part finale, I've said my piece on it. That was just god awful. And I'm going to make a correction on something I said last week. Last week, I said it's slightly better than The Wedding of River Song. I take that back now. I actually rewatched Wedding of River Song for the very first time in well over a decade just last week. And I'm not gonna lie, it's still a mess, and I'm still not a huge fan of it. But even that had some good, strong character moments, when him learning that brilliant moment he learns about the passing of the Brigadier, and him deciding it's time that he should go to that lake, and him saying he didn't want to die alone, and that he always feels very fondly of Amy and Rory. That moment is absolutely fantastic. There's little moments like that peppered throughout. What is ultimately a very messy story. And also, at least it's in and out quickly. I think that episode was like 45 minutes, and
Yeah.
this was way over an hour. So, yeah, I know what I said last week. Well, now I've taken it back. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the Wedding of River Song is slightly better. It's slightly better than this, and
Okay.
yeah, it's not gonna lie. There's also a lot of what didn't help this era is that it just suddenly ends, and we're left with a lot of plot threads that left up in the air that should be resolved, like Susan coming back, Rogue, and we don't know what's happened to Rogue. Is he stuck in a hell dimension forever now? Is he?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're never seeing him again, frankly.
Yeah,
I don't see any narrative reason they'll bring him back now.
yeah, because he's so tight to Ncuti Gatwa's doctor. Now that he's
Exactly.
gone, they're not going to be bothered bringing him back, so he's stuck in a hell dimension. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
that's not good. And then there's also the stuff with the fugitive doctor, what she said about her story might be ending soon. What's going on with that? The whole thing with the boss, whatever that is. It's
Yeah, Russell doesn't know who it is, so
yeah, it's
doesn't even know who the Doctor is anymore.
exactly. It's so and yeah, also what really didn't help this era was a number of things like the shorter episode count, as you've all stated. It didn't help the flow of the season, to be honest, because it's as I said, it had an identity crisis of it doesn't know what it wants to be, whether it's what trying to be for the kids, whether it's trying to be for all ages, whether it's trying to
Yeah.
appeal to older fans or to classic Doctor Who fans, because it feels like such a weird hodgepodge of different varying tones all over the place. And when you have it compact within a short 8-story season, you're definitely going to notice this way more than it would be if it was like a 13, 14 episode season. So I think reducing the episode count really hurt it badly. And
Mhm.
I mean, as you're saying, like because of that, Ncuti was only the Doctor for a year and a half, and that's insane. It's really insane, and
Yeah.
it's really upsetting, to be brutally honest. Because as I said, he had so much potential. Even the companions had so much potential, and I felt that they were both done dirty
Yeah.
by the end of it. In the past, you had all the stuff on Twitter like hashtag justice for Martha, and everyone saying like Martha Jones was such an underappreciated companion and had so much potential. I expect something very similar going to happen to Ruby and Belinda, especially but in Belinda's case.
Hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
it's weird, all of this. It's as you said, there was so much potential, so many great stories that I absolutely love. Like I said, like Boom, 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble, and even this season with stuff like Lux or Story in the Engine, absolutely fantastic
Yeah.
stuff. But I just felt like all these outside forces, like with the Disney deal, the drop in ratings from season one, and Russell's ideas sort of going out of control by the very end of it, as we all saw what happened. I feel like all these different things just it just really hurt the era as a whole, and it's a shame because all of these people deserved so much better than this. Ncuti deserved better, Millie deserved better, Varada deserved better, and honest and yeah, I know Christopher Eccleston only had like one season, but even if you look at that one season, it felt almost complete, really, because
Yeah.
it did feel like a complete arc, whereas this doesn't feel complete. It just suddenly stops,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think that's a real shame that it had to end this way. And all these different, as I said, like these factors coming in by making it shorter seasons, having these weird finales. It just reminds me of that bit in Jurassic Park where they said is the worst idea in the long sad history of bad ideas. That's basically it.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. As I said at the beginning, wasted potential. It's just like I felt with Colin Baker and Jodie Whittaker, just a lot of wasted potential.
Yeah, it does feel like it's going to be one of those eras we look back on in many years' time and think, what could have been? because especially with Ncuti as a Doctor, I don't feel like we've even scratched the surface of his Doctor to an extent, and he's gone, and I think it's unlikely he's going to be involved in the show in the future. Really, he's in a nice way, he's too big for that now. Really, he's going to be in Hollywood films and whatever else. Like, he's not going to. Maybe he'd come back for a 70th special or something, but fundamentally he's done and dusted with the show, and I think that's a real shame. And as you say, Ryan, it's kind of comparative to Colin Baker in that getting quite a short tenure, not being treated very well. Obviously, Ncuti chose to leave over being forced to leave, but still, it was kind of that wasn't the plan for them to leave, and they had to change the whole situation for that to happen, and that just all feels really messy. But it's interesting what you say about season 1 being your preferred season, because I would say season 2 is my preferred season, as much as the reality war was terrible. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it, and I think that every episode from episode 1 to 7 of season 2 I can reasonably enjoy. Like, I don't think any of those episodes are kind of duds or really bad. In the most part, they're really good. And I think it's also really, really interesting, because I was thinking about how for most of this season, the social media reaction to every episode was really quite positive, and everybody was going, wow, this series is so much better than season 1, and like, this episode's good and this episode's good, and I felt like there was generally quite a positive vibe on social media about the show. Sure, ratings were still terrible, like, we're just used to that at this point, that's inevitable, but in terms of actual fans watching the show, who've always watched the show, I felt like the vibes from after Lux or after The Well, even Lucky Day, there's a little bit more mix there, but even after that, and then obviously the Rani appearing instead of Song Contest, like, there just seemed to be a lot of excitement and positivity about the show. And it's been fascinating how the reality war has so completely killed that in every single way possible. Kind of, it's completely killed the opinion of this season by going, now this whole season was terrible, which I really don't think it was. I just think it's so fundamentally let down at the end. Like, it's frustrating to watch the reality war because there's so many things that are just annoying about it and the decisions that are made. And it also has just created so much negativity about the future because of Billie Piper appearing and that decision taken as well. So it's almost like the perception, the fandom feeling is both negative about what we've just seen and negative about what's to come. And I think that's just such a disappointing situation to be in, when actually there was a lot to like about a lot of season 2 and a reasonable amount of season 1. Like, this is still not one of my favourite eras of Doctor Who. Like, the Capaldi era is better. RTD1 is better. I think the Matt Smith era is better. I think I would only put this era in front of the Chibnall/Jodie's era. I think that's the only thing it sits in front of. But it doesn't feel like it was all around terrible. There's just been such extremes of really, really good stuff and stuff that's just like offensively bad, not even just like boring or disappointing, just like actively frustrating decisions that were made in the episodes that have just wrecked seasons.
Yeah. I will say I think how I kind of looked at it was that with that first season, there was no point in it that left me sort of like, WTF, like, what were you thinking? I mean, maybe Space Baby's a tiny bit, but then again, what do you expect? I mean, it's kind of similar to a bit of New Earth, and it's sort of the same as sort of that. And even though there were some parts about Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire Death that were kind of like the whole pointing at the sign thing, like, what were you thinking? It didn't leave me angry. It didn't leave me like upset. Whereas I felt like going into season 2, I mean, obviously, like, as I said, Interstellar Song Contest, I did feel like it's become the kill the moon of this era. And looking at the 2-part finale, Wishworld, as I mentioned in my review of that, it did leave me pretty nervous because there was so much stuff involved. I'm like, how are they going to wrap this up? It just left me very nervous. And I was really hoping to be wrong on that. But then the reality war happened. And whereas Empire Death didn't really make me angry, this kind of did. And it's rare that I become that, honestly. It's so that frustrated and that just so annoyed by it. And because obviously this season, because we've had a much worse finale, and of course Belinda having to be brought in because Ruby couldn't be the main companion anymore, and Belinda's character just not mattering at all after The Well.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of why season 2, I'll look at it a little bit less than season 1, because it is. But I will say, if I was to look at it, compare it, I would say it's roughly on a par with Matt Smith's last two seasons, Series 6 and Series 7. It's sort of around that same sort of mixed position, that sort of mixed feelings, how I felt about, again, with those last two Matt Smith era seasons.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's definitely better than the Chibnall Jodie era, in terms of, especially in terms of writing and directing.
Yeah, exactly. No, I can agree with that. I think these two seasons sit below most of series 1 to 10, but above series 11 to 13, which is something. And so let's take a little bit of a change of pace. I'll come to you, Charlie. If you could pick one episode or moment or character or thing about this era that you would say is your highlight of these two seasons, what would it be?
That is an interesting question. 73 yards comes to mind.
Okay.
All of 73 yards I thought was great.
Yeah.
I think I watched it the other day, just because I was like, this is probably the best episode of the era. And it's great. I think I liked it more than when we did our review of it last year.
Okay. Wow.
Like even the Roger William stuff I thought was better, less kind of weird, and kind of we sort of agreed it was a bit strange and kind of it sort of made the pace of the episode a bit odd and weird. I didn't mind it as much in this episode, and I thought that is kind of the route I want Doctor Who to take, where it becomes kind of experimental and Black Mirror like, and you're not trying to make Doctor Who something that's like creating content and getting people to talk about it on social media. You're just trying to make a good, interesting mystery episode. And I feel like that's kind of what this should have been, and it should have been something like that. Not exactly something like that every episode, because obviously the Doctor's not in it. But if you look at my favorite episodes of this era, I included the 60th specials in this, but my top three is 73 Yards, The Well, and Wild Blue Yonder, which are all like the most weird experimental episodes. And I didn't even think about that when I was making this list, but that is my top three, and I don't think that's a coincidence. If you do a reboot like that, that's what you should be trying to do, something like that, and having a consistent tone, and not just throwing all these classic Who villains at the wall and seeing what sticks. And sadly, I think none of them did. It's just, that's what should have happened, and it's kind of annoyed me that we don't have that sort of consistency. And I think what you guys were saying about the finales and the fact that they're terrible, and I agree. I think those two in Space Babies are the only truly bad episodes of this whole era.
Yeah, I agree.
Including the 60th specials. I truly think there are three bad stories. A few mid ones, and then lots of it's really quite good. But it's just the finale has so much weight and kind of too much power over people's opinions of the seasons. And I think if I were the showrunner of Doctor Who, I would scrap the concept of a finale entirely.
Okay.
I would put the script, I think, sort of would be the best and kind of a very good sort of episode last. I truly wouldn't have a finale, because 15 finales of Doctor Who seasons in New Who, I think about 5 of them are good. I truly think it's just they have such a low hit rate. I feel like, and they alter people's opinions of the season so much, and they've got so much like weighting. I feel like they should just get rid of them and just have, we could have got 2 more individual Doctor Who episodes instead of Wishworld and the Reality War, and we just didn't. And I think we don't need finales. It's not, Doctor Who isn't like that. We don't need kind of, if you look at classic Who, we never really had them. We had I guess like the Armageddon factor and the ultimate foe, and kind of like the invasion of time, I guess, not in the sense that it's like a thematic conclusion to the season, but the stakes were kind of raised, and it was obviously a bigger story than the rest. All 3 of which are pretty bad examples, but generally speaking, Doctor Who is something that should be just kind of episodic monster of the week, where we just have an episode a season. And I think if the season ended on the Interstellar Song Contest without the Rani reveal, it would have been received a lot better. I mean, I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but 73 Yards absolutely is my favorite of this era. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, Millie Gibson is great. And I feel like it's such a weird mystery almost as to why she left, because we don't really know. it's very odd. Like we know, it's kind of obvious why Ncuti left. But it's kind of a Christopher Eccleston case, less extreme, less heated, but we don't really know why Millie Gibson left. And I think it's odd that we have that sort of thing. But I feel like assuming Billie Piper isn't the next Doctor, because I've thought about this a bit more, and I really don't think she is. I feel like the next Doctor should be someone who is a bit older, like 50s, like Peter Capaldi, and is more sort of willing to stick around and doesn't, fair enough to Ncuti for wanting this, but he wanted to be like a big movie star and he didn't want to wait for another Doctor Who. And I kind of get it, but I think maybe for the next one, cast someone who is just more willing to stick around. And I'm not saying do 5 seasons, but like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I
stick
want
around
one
for a
that's
while.
I kind of want a new face of New Who almost. Like, as much as I love the guy, I'm mildly sick of David Tennant purely because of his sort of power over New Who. He's just the guy. I want a kind of new, huge face of Doctor Who. But yeah, I mean, it might just be Billie Piper for 3 seasons. We don't really know, but
Yeah.
yeah, obviously we're going to talk more about the future of Doctor Who and what we want, but I don't really know what's going to happen, to be honest. I feel like I want Russell gone, sadly. I just think we need something completely fresh, someone who's never worked for Doctor Who before, a completely new Doctor. The Billie Piper thing simply didn't happen. It was a dream. Um, it was all a bad dream. And then we just completely start from scratch. Have a season like I don't know. I just quite like a Doctor that sort of feels like an alien. Because as good as Ncuti was and Jodie was, I didn't get the sense from them that they're an alien who's thousands of years old. The way I do with sort of Tom Baker, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi.
Yeah.
I quite like someone like that. But yeah, it's an extremely weird time to be a Doctor Who fan, and we have no idea what's going on really.
Yeah.
And we don't even have a release date for the spin-off yet, I don't think. I know there's kind of I sent you guys that thing that was kind of it might be like April 2026 or something,
Who knows?
which
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah,
yeah, we don't know. And obviously we have the announcement of the CBeebies animated show. I'm sure
Yeah.
we all can't wait for that.
we're all excited. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
it
Beatles
shows.
are going to be excited for that. Yeah,
It shows
she'll be very excited.
the show isn't completely dead if they're willing to commission something like that. So I obviously
Yeah.
I don't think I'm realistically going to watch it because it's literally aimed at like 3-year-olds. But
Yeah,
it's good that they still want to make something Doctor Who related, and it's
definitely.
not that
Yeah,
they've given up on the brand completely. So I take that as
exactly.
positive,
It
and we'll see.
it gave me a lot of hope that we will actually have Doctor Who in 2027, and it's not literally a wilderness years until 2030, whatever. We do have something
Yeah.
the year after next. And if the War Between the Land and the Sea is next spring, I'm kind of more okay with that because it means we don't have a full calendar year with zero Doctor Who at all for the first time since 2004, because that would be pretty crazy. But
Yeah.
it could happen. It could happen.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah. Anyway, bottom line, 73 yards is great, and more of the last 2 seasons should have been like that, and not like like the finales. It's just
Yeah.
well, I mean, you guys have said identity crisis. There's no consistent tone, and if someone asks me what's the 15th Doctor's era like, I'll kind of just shrug and say, I don't know. It's just
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There isn't really a
it's
good
odd.
adjective you could use to describe. I feel like Capaldi era was always, it was the darker era of, Doctor Who, and Matt Smith era was the kind of the fairy tale, more magical era of the show. And I guess David Tennant's first era was kind of the Doctor being a bit more human and having sort of relationships with companions a bit more. And I just don't know whether there's really an adjective or a phrase to describe this era, apart from just a mishmash of episodes where the Doctor goes on adventures and has general fun, I suppose. I don't know, Bill. One thing I did want to just think about, because we are looking at the Ncuti Gatwa era as a whole. So, what would you say are some of Ncuti's kind of best moments as the Doctor that we've seen in the various episodes? I mean, off the top of my head comes to mind the end of Dot and Bubble, the great moment where he's dealing with that. I think is fantastic. His first scenes in the Giggle, I think a lot of those are really, really good as well. But what are some of the other moments that you've really enjoyed of his Doctor over these 2 seasons?
Yeah, So yeah, literally, I was just about to say the Dot and Bubble ending. That's one that immediately comes to mind. I think um, it's tricky because it's like I feel like I'm overdue like a massive rewatch where I just watch all of his era in one go at one point.
Yeah.
Um, I do quite like the sort of darker side we see of him in the Interstellar Song Contest. I do quite like that. I
Okay.
think I wish, again, it's like I wish we'd gotten more shooty anyway, but I wish we'd gotten more shooty because then even with just like another season, like a third season,
Yeah.
there probably would have been like something that kind of evolves from that. Like I feel like that would have been quite interesting to see 15 go a little bit darker, probably not like massively so, but like still a bit darker to like where he started off from. And then um yeah, I think those are the two moments that are standing out the most to me is the end of Dot and Bubble and his whole kind of almost like vengeance streak in the Interstellar Song Contest. I think those are like really like not to say that like his performances in all the other episodes are not
Mm.
equally as strong because they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main things to take away from his era, as brief as it was, is I don't ever feel like he was phoning it in at any point. Like I feel like he was committing to the part
Hmm.
pretty well. Um, and not to say that like all the other doctors like were ever phoning it in, because I think most of them do pretty good jobs, but I feel like he's probably the best we've kind of had since Capaldi, I would say, in terms of like consistently a good performance. Not to say that Jodie's were like terrible, because again, she was doing what she could do with all those scripts and everything, but I feel like Shooty was consistently putting in pretty good performances. And it says something how I'm not normally like into the whole idea of the Doctor um experiencing like love or romance with another character. And yet I did buy his whole kind of romance with Rogue in
Yeah.
Rogue. I feel like him and Jonathan Groff really sold that, and I think it's a real shame that we're not going to see more of that now because Shooty's left. Jonathan Groff is a really big name, busy actor anyway, and yeah, it would just feel like if they did bring Rogue back with another Doctor now, it wouldn't have the same impact because it
Yeah.
would have.
Exactly.
It just feels like it needs to be with Shooty or not at all, really.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's just a shame. I think it's just a waste of talent, unfortunately, in terms of Shooty, in terms of Millie and Varada as well, and
Yeah.
just so many of the actors across the board, really, like, but especially Shooty, like he feels. I was just like I was just starting to I think gel with his doctor and just starting to
Mhm.
like get used to him and just starting to I think like it's funny because now that he's gone, I'm starting to look at the 15th Doctor and I feel like he's slowly starting to creep his way up my ranking of doctors a
Yeah.
bit. And I'm looking at him in a very different light now. And I just yeah, it's annoying because we're not going to get another season with him. Not even going to get another episode with him.
Yeah.
It just feels like there was so much potential. Some of it, yeah, you could blame with the writing. Some of it was, as you've all said, kind of like factors that were outside anyone's control, especially Russell's. Um, yeah, it's just a shame, really. Like it is another one of those eras, like the Colin era, all over again, where there's so much potential there, and you can see your leading actor really trying to give it his all, but for whatever reason, just something's still fundamentally wrong with that era,
Yeah.
which is a real shame.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think It's such a shame that we have to talk so negatively about the show because, like, I think for all of us, it's probably our favorite TV show and we absolutely love it. And that's why we kind of want it to be good so badly. And I just don't think it is. And I don't think it's just us sitting in a little bubble going, we're massive fans and we think this is terrible. I think that is mostly the perception of a lot of the general audience as well as hardcore fans like us. And that's just such a shame because I feel like we went through that for 5 years with the Chibnall era, which again is such a shame that we have to be negative about that. But again, I struggle to feel really positively about it. And it feels like 2023 felt, heading towards the 60th, we were like, okay, it's David Tennant. Yeah, but it's only 3 episodes. It'll be a fun celebration. And then we'll launch into this great new era, fresh start. It's going to be exciting. And it just has all petered out within 18 months. Like, it's literally it was November 2023, so just over a year and a half ago that this era started with the 60th. And now it's all done and we have no idea of what is happening next. Absolutely nothing. So it's a real crazy time. So Ryan, I'll come to you. Let's think a little bit about how the reality war ended. I know we talked a lot about it in the last episode, so I don't want to kind of dwell too much on it. But right now we have no idea when Doctor Who's coming back. We don't know who the Doctor is. We don't the show is in its most perilous situation it's been since it came back. I think it's fair to say, because there is no series commissioned or anything. So how do you feel about that? And what would you like to see happen next?
Wow. Big question. I will say if it is, well, first off, before I go into sort of what I think maybe they should do, I would just want to very quickly, I would just like to say that obviously it is a shame, as you said, it is a shame we have to talk about, how frustrated we are. But because, as I said, there was that potential. As I said, we loved this Doctor a lot. We loved these companions, but they deserved so much better than what they got at the end. I mean, obviously, I'm still really annoyed that Ruby never got a goodbye in the reality war. Like, Belinda gets one, but not Ruby. I still think that was the point where I was most angry at, was the fact that Ruby never got a goodbye and she was the first companion of his. And it's just a real shame. And as I said, I do think this era, this whole RTD2 deserved better than this, because as I think we've been mostly positive about it up until now. As I said, it got me interested again. It got me positive into talking about Doctor Who again. Even at a point where felt like I was pretty much done with it after the Chibnall era. Yep. As I said, I found myself, wanting to talk about it, and obviously that 3-way smash of Boom, 73 yards, Dot and Bubble, absolutely fantastic. I mean, I think those are the high points of the Ncuti Gatwa era for me, was just with those 3 episodes from that first season. And I think those were some of the very best in Series 10, those 3 episodes. But now, though, we're at this point where there have been definitely a lot of points in this era where it feels like, we're prioritizing like cryptic teasers and wham moments to generate content and all that, and seeing from that Billy Piper tease that we could be potentially still be heading down this road again in the future.
Yeah.
It's just left me feeling tired and fed up, to be honest. I'm left going, I've been here before and I don't like it, nor do I really like this direction we seem to be going in. It's honestly what I feel like maybe what they should do to kind of relaunch the show is do another Series 11 kind of situation. Now, here's the thing. Yes, Series 11 wasn't good. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of reasons that season fell flat, whether it's poor direction, not good enough character writing, bland characterization and writing for most of it.
Yeah, it's
You know,
probably a good. It's probably a good thing that we weren't doing a podcast on the show back there. It's bad enough during
oh
Lux,
no.
but I think if we were doing a podcast in Series 11, it would have been a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of the ideas it was trying to put forward,
Yeah,
its approach, was not bad at all. I mean, if you were telling me that it was going to have, we're going to have a fresh launch of the show, fresh new season, no story arc whatsoever, it was mostly sort of standalone stories. Um, I would have, and mostly new villains.
yeah,
I would have been down for it. I'd be like, yeah, this is a good change of pace. This is just what it needed. The problem was the execution wasn't very good. I mean, that was its real issue. And if we just had that, but better executed, I think it it would give the show the fresh injection it would so desperately need. And obviously, people have been asking for a new showrunner, and honestly, I'd be down for that.
yeah,
Honestly, because I think it needs fresh blood at this point. I
absolutely.
mean, I've seen people touting people like J. Michael Straczynski,
Yeah,
um, that he should be showrunning. And honestly, let him. He's a fantastic writer. He made Babylon 5, which is a fantastic show. He wrote one of the best runs on Spider-Man ever. It's and he likes Doctor Who, so give the guy a chance. I think he has what it takes. He's worked with two Doctor Who actors before. He's worked with Freema Agyeman and Sylvester McCoy, so he clearly he does know his stuff. So I suggest giving the reins to him. And it's so funny looking back because obviously Series 11 was trying to take it in a new direction, but even though it wasn't really a step forward, it was just basically a tiny little nudge into a new possible future, which I couldn't see working at all in the state that it was. But ever since then, Series 12 onwards, it just feels like a massive step back from that, as it's possible to conceive. Ever since, I feel like since Series 12, we've just been bombarded with all this lore and, all this different stuff that I feel like that's kind of dragging the show down a little bit. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using lore. It's just how well you execute it. And looking at this era with Ncuti Gatwa, I mean, the whole pantheon of Discord had potential, but I get it. The problem was the gods were just beaten so quickly, and also it was structured wrong because because even though it sort of finished with Sutek, who was the big bad of them all, it still kind of continued after that with Lux, and then that Wish Baby, which, let's be honest, that was a glorified MacGuffin in of itself. And it's like, if you're going to do this, it should have been before Sutek. It should have been a slow ascent as like a building tension of these gods. I feel like Sutek should have been the end game for the Pantheon. That should have been where it should have ended with Sutek, but it just sort of continued after that. It was structured wrong with that. And as I said, it didn't land well with how easily they were defeated. And because of that, I was left thinking, where's the Daleks when you need them, man? And that's what's even more frustrating is that Ncuti, he said he wanted to face the Daleks. He said it'd be so annoying if he don't got to face it. And, well, Stephen Moffat himself said something good. When the Matt Smith era started,
yeah,
and we got to Victory of the Daleks, Stephen Moffat did an interview where he said, is the Doctor really the Doctor if they've never faced the Daleks? And that's why he made sure that both Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi faced them very early on in their run. So just to establish what this Doctor is like when he's in the same room with the Daleks. This Doctor never faced a single Dalek throughout his entire era. And now he's never going to. And that's a real shame because I wouldn't mind seeing some classic enemies like the Daleks or the Cybermen with Gower, because I feel like we could have had a great story with that. But again, that's what I feel like when it said wasted potential. So if they were to continue, I think, as I said, they kind of need to look at some of the ideas of something like Series 11, no story arc, just abandon the story arc because it's clear they haven't been working out. Maybe, I don't know if you should make it a bit serialized, but bring back a lot of multi-part stories, maybe tie them together, do a sort of maybe I would like to say key to time situation, but as I said, the story arcs haven't been working out lately, so maybe just bring back multi-part stories, make the seasons long again, make them about 10 to 14 episodes, and give us a new, fresh TARDIS team. Slowly reintroduce the classic enemies again, and to give them a fresh, new approach. And as I said, just maybe have some of the maturity of the Capaldi era. Well, not so dark, but more the maturity of that era, combined with some of the more high-brained concepts that Moffat did during the Matt Smith and Capaldi runs, combined with a bit of the character work of RTD's first year, and then you've got a winning success there. I think you've got everything you need, and
Absolutely.
I feel like, as I said, it just needs fresh blood at this point. And as I said, I think maybe RTD's at a point where he's kind of maybe run out of ideas. I mean, if the rumors are true and that this whole Billie Piper thing, it's teaming up for one special where she's teaming up with David Tennant's 14th Doctor and Donna Noble, I don't know if I'm going to stick around and watch that, to be honest, because it just feels like overindulgence. I'd rather just skip that and move straight on to the next fresh era with the next Doctor, honestly.
I mean, if we have to have that episode, but that could be Russell's last episode, then maybe that's worth going for at this point. And then we can start properly afresh. Let's just deal with the pointless, nostalgic, bring back all of RCD1 in one episode, and then we'll move on completely.
Yeah, it's as I keep saying, as it just needs fresh blood. It needs longer seasons again to allow these concepts and stories and character work more time to breathe. And that's sort of what's been, as I said, been lacking because we've had these short seasons. Is that because they've been short, we don't have time for proper character interactions between the Doctor and these companions like Ruby and Belinda. Because for a good chunk of it, they're separated. I mean, you look at the first season, like 73 yards, Ruby's on her own. Dot and Bubble, they're hardly in it. I mean, the main character of Dot and Bubble is basically the main villain.
Yeah.
Rogue, they're separated. And then look at second season. Lucky Day, Dr. Belinda are hardly in it. Story in the Engine, and Interstellar Song Contest, they're separated. And as I said, in the two-part finale, Belinda's mostly just stuck in a box, and she's basically gets rewritten to be a mum twice. It's weird.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. So Charlie, I was thinking about Billie Piper, and I've kind of settled on my feeling that there's no good outcome. If she's the Doctor, I don't really like it very much. If she's not the Doctor, it's just stupid clickbait, and I also don't really like that. So I don't know. Is there a good outcome with whatever Russell decides to do next? Like, is there a way this works out well?
Not with Russell doing it. The good outcome is, I'm sorry if Russell is listening to this. I truly am. You made some great seasons of Doctor Who, but the good outcome is, like I said, no more Russell, complete 2005 overhaul. We don't even have a regeneration. It's just a new Doctor. It's the 16th Doctor. Billie Piper thing didn't exist. That is the perfect outcome.
Yes. With
Russell staying on, there isn't. He's dug himself into a hole because there's two possibilities. She's the Doctor or she's not. And it's kind of Russell's two biggest, flaws, really, as a writer and as a showrunner recently. Each of those possibilities basically proves one of them. And he's either creatively bankrupt if she is the Doctor, or he's writing for social media and generating content if she's not the Doctor. There's no good way out, because he's done one of those things. He's done both, but he's definitely done one of them with this. And it's just, I feel of all companion actors, I don't want to say Billie Piper's the worst because she's a good actress, but I feel like it would have been it would have been better received if it was most other companions as well, like Free Madgerman, probably not Catherine Tate, but like Jenna Coleman or something, because she shows up through the Doctor's timeline. So what if she becomes the Doctor? That's a cool concept, but
Yeah, and she
it's
like nearly wants to become the Doctor in series 9 and all that kind of
exactly.
storyline as well. So
I mean, I still wouldn't have liked it, but
no,
Jenna Coleman would have made more sense
yeah,
than Billy Piper.
yeah.
Even like I don't know, even Manda Gill or something. I don't know. It just like my initial reaction to seeing Billy Piper was positive because it, it's Rose, and I was like, oh my God, there's no way he did it. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But, the more I think about it, it just plummeted in the hours and then the days after I saw this. I was like, there's no way this is going to work.
Yeah.
I think she's not the Doctor. I think as much as I want it to just be, yeah, that never happened, complete fresh slate, we're going to get some sort of special in 2027 that's like, it's actually like the Bad Wolf
Yeah.
because the
It's the
Doctor,
heart of the TARDIS or something that's
yeah, the
affected
Doctor
it, or I
regenerated
don't
kind
know.
of with the TARDIS, and it's the Bad Wolf manifesting, and it's basically kind of the TARDIS is kind of possessing the Doctor almost, and it's going to be something like that.
And here's a
And
load of
then,
flashbacks from 2005 as well,
oh
because
yeah,
of course we've got to do that.
she'll to return to the roots of the Bad Wolf. She'll go to London and she'll see Jackie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jackie will be there. Maybe not Mickey. But
Probably not.
there'll be loads of nostalgia. We'll get like I don't know, the girl from Love and Monsters will show up or something. Not Love and Monsters. Fear her.
They'll end up on Bad Wolf Bay for some reason as
Yeah,
well, of
yeah, yeah.
course.
We'll get Elton. Um,
Yeah.
from Love and Monsters. We'll get like Kel, the council guy or
Oh,
something. I don't know.
council axe. It's a council van.
Yeah,
What a
yeah.
guy.
It'll just be a massive nostalgia fest
Yep.
for not for the Donna and Wilf stuff, but now for the Rose and Jackie stuff, and we'll get all of that. I can actually see this happening in 2 years' time.
This is what's so sad about it is although we joke, this actually isn't completely unbelievable based on the
Yeah,
last 2 years of Doctor Who.
yeah. I mean, we truly do have no idea what's going to happen. I actually think this is the most likely outcome, to be honest. And then at the end of it, we'll get a 16th Doctor, an actual 16th Doctor, and I hate to say it, Russell might stay on, but I don't know what's going to happen. I feel like will there be another like streaming deal? Does there need to be? I think that's a question. Does there need to be? I feel like Amazon Prime makes the most sense.
Yeah.
They kind of if you look at like The Boys and Invincible, that's the big two. They've done very well with both of those. Obviously much darker science fiction, but they are capable of doing good things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's really dug himself into a hole. It's not looking good, and it's just a class. It's a symptom of, like you guys were saying, the fact that there's no one telling Russell his ideas are stupid, and Russell has a writer's room filled with clones of himself that clap every time he has an idea, and there's no one, there's no script editor, there's no one to just tell him off and say, no, that's stupid, don't do that. It's just Russell kind of having a monopoly on Doctor Who, and just if he wants to bring Billy Piper back, Billy Piper's back. And there's
literally, yeah.
there's
He's
nothing
just
he can do
panicked and
about it.
gone, oh, I need to have something to end the episode because Shooty's now regenerating. I guess I'll phone up my
Exactly.
old mate Billy.
It would have been so easy to do a survival ending and just have him go off, but he needs a social media engagement. He needs it. And
Yeah, or even if they had managed to cast a new Doctor or something, like imagine how cool that would have been if we'd had a shot regeneration into just a brand new actor as the Doctor. Like
that would have been
actually,
brilliant.
it would have just been the first ever proper shock regeneration of a new Doctor.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like if Billy Piper was going to be definitively the Doctor, then Russell would have clarified that, just like he did with David Tennant when he came back as the 14th Doctor. He was like very quickly, this is the 14th Doctor. This isn't the 10th Doctor coming back.
Yeah.
This isn't something else. This is the 14th Doctor. So the fact
Exactly.
he
There
hasn't
was a
done
whole-
that just suggests she's not the Doctor.
Yeah, he made a massive point of it right after Power of the Doctor. He's like,
Exactly.
this is the Doctor, there's no trickery, because he knew people would be like, this isn't the real Doctor, it's just 10 again or something.
Yeah.
And obviously we have, the kind of, I mean, it's been talked about to death, but the fact that introducing Billy Piper, and not as the Doctor, but introducing Billy Piper, it's done on purpose. I think knowing Russell, he still doesn't know how it's going to work.
Yep.
and he still doesn't know what's actually going on with it.
Well, he's
But
probably got 4 different versions sat on his desk, just deciding which one he's going to pick up
yeah,
and actually finish.
yeah, we just need to
Yeah.
kind of. There's still kind of no confirmation that the Disney deal has ended, which is the
Mm.
weirdest part. There's no official kind of the Disney deal is done. It's just not happening anymore. And I kind of want some movement in the sense that it's just like, yeah, Disney's done. We're doing this. Even if they're just making it in-house with Bad Wolf and it's just, broadcast on BBC, that's fine. Like, I just want something, and you get lots of people kind of wishing for a hiatus, which I understand where they're coming from, and I think if it did come back from a hiatus, it would come back stronger. But I feel like wishing for no Doctor Who as a Doctor Who fan is just a strange sentiment to have, and it's kind of almost arrogance as Doctor Who fans. We assume that because our show is so huge and has existed for 62 years,
Yeah.
that if it goes on hiatus, it will come back in a few years because it's so massive. But it's kind of be careful what you wish for, because I don't want a hiatus and then it comes back in 2040 or something.
Yeah.
I'd rather just stick around for maybe some more RTD2 slot and then get something completely fresh, even if it takes until like 2030 or something. Just bear with it. And thing is, even if we do have some more of this era, we have good episodes. Good
Yeah,
episodes
exactly.
exist.
And
And
Russell's written some of those good episodes, a
yeah,
lot of those good episodes.
exactly. I don't know. I think every year since like I don't know, every year since 2017, I don't think Return of Doctor Mysterio was very good. Um, we've had at least one good Doctor Who episode.
Hmm.
But I think that's safe to say. I
Yeah.
think Resolution was good. I think Village of the Angel was good. Um, you know, Power of the Doctor,
Yeah.
and then obviously 60th specials, season one, season two. We have good Doctor Who. It does exist, and I think like even if it does mean having a sort of even just a mediocre season, if we get some good Doctor Who out of it, I'm never really going to complain too much because for every reality war and space babies, we have a 73 yards and a well.
Exactly.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. But bottom line is about Billy Piper. He's just dug himself into a hole because either he's admitting he's writing for social media, or he's admitting he has nothing left and he's creatively bankrupt because
Yep.
it's one of those things. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I agree with you. And so, Bill, do you have any vision, any direction you'd like to see the show go in next, given the few options we're stuck with at the moment?
Um, I think the least bad scenario for me would be you just have Russell and Billy for a special two. Maybe that's from like the end of next year and into 2027 or something.
Yeah.
And then you just start completely afresh with new Doctor, new showrunner, etc. Um, I don't really know if that will actually happen because it's like it's strange. I kind of feel like maybe we're starting to get to a 1980s scenario
It does
with some
feel
of
all
this.
very 1986 or 1989. It's a bit hard to tell, doesn't it?
It does feel, yeah, it definitely feels like 85 at least with the hiatus
Yeah.
and then obviously we had a showrunner which stuck around for a very long time in the 80s, John Nathan Turner.
Yeah.
We could potentially have another one with Russell T Davies where he sticks around for however long it's going to be,
Yeah.
and then that could be it I don't think it's going to be another 15 years, but for at least like a 2 or 3 years or something, that could be it for Doctor Who.
Hmm.
Um, I want to believe that's not going to happen, and that Russell is probably just going to try and wrap everything up with this current era within the next couple of years at least. But I wouldn't be too surprised if he decides to stay on, and particularly if there's, I know he said they've had discussions about who would be his replacement, but also in a way, I suppose there's no obvious successor for the showrunner. Like
Hmm.
there's tended to be like obviously with Russell's first era, it was definitely going to be Moffat looking back on it now.
Yeah.
Um, even like the changeover from Moffat to Chibnall kind of makes sense because, as Moffat kind of said, I think at the time, Chibnall was the best choice because he'd already been running his own shows, basically.
Yep.
So it made sense for him to be the next one. And then obviously you've had Russell come back now, and I think I would have preferred it if he'd have been just there for like the 60th and then someone else, maybe someone who like he could have well, not supervised, but like kind of advised at
Yeah.
least
Yes.
with their kind of
Exactly.
era. I feel like that probably would have worked better. I would have still liked to have kept Shooty if at all possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have liked it if he'd have been like a almost like a Kevin Feige type of person where he's involved
Mm.
in the production of it, but he's not the main showrunner, not the main head writer. Like that is someone else, and he is just there as like an executive advisor, helping to craft this new Doctor Who. Um, so it's a shame we kind of haven't really had that, but I don't know. It feels like we're either gonna get Russell just calling it quits, and he does a thing for maybe a few specials with Billy, and then goes, and we get someone new. I would honestly settle for anyone at this point. Like I'd settle for Pete
Chris,
McTighe.
Chris Chibnall.
Well, not Moffat or Chibnall again, because yeah, that
We need to
would
go
just be
forwards. We
like,
really need to go forwards, not
yeah, we
backwards.
do need to go forwards. Ideally, I would like it to be someone who's literally never worked on the show before or
Yeah.
had very small connections to it. Like, yeah, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. I feel there's a good chance Russell's going to stay on regardless, and he's just going to do a JNT. He's going to be there till the bitter end. And I
Yeah.
don't want that to happen, but it could very well happen. And it could be by the end of the 2020s, early 2030s, that's it for Doctor Who after like 7 seasons of RTD2 or whatever. And
Yeah.
I really don't want that to be the case, but that is a possibility, which is quite scary to think about because
Yeah. Yeah.
I, as much as like, yes, there have been good parts of this era, like, I feel like the show really does just need a fresh start again. Like, it feels that's what it needs. Don't bother with all this lore explanations like all the time. Don't bother with all that. Like, also just get away from the last sort of Time Lords thing. Like, why not just bring the Time Lords back at this point? Like, why not just resurrect
Yeah.
Gallifrey and do a political thriller like set on it? I don't know, or
Yeah.
something. Just something a bit different where it feels new and interesting again, rather than just rehashing the same two or three ideas again and again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
honestly, it does almost feel like RTD came back just so he could save Doctor Who and to make sure it doesn't go off the air.
Yeah.
It kind of felt like that a little bit, and you're absolutely right. Maybe he should have been like a Kevin Feige kind of producer, managing it, but not necessarily showrunning it. And honestly, I think perhaps maybe the best showrunner for Shooting Gatwa could have been Inua Ellams, who did Story in the Engine, because honestly, of all the writers, I felt like he and even Moffat, but even especially Ellams, got 15's characterization pitch perfect. I mean,
Mm.
Story in the Engine is my favorite story of the second season, and because it was so experimental, so creative, I thought Inua Ellams did such a fantastic job with that story, and I felt like he got the 15th Doctor's characterization down so perfectly. Did let me wondering, maybe he should have showrun Shooty's era because he seems to have a good understanding of this. I mean, I know he did theatre work prior to doing Story of the Edge, but he just seems like he knows what he's doing, and I feel like maybe he should have done it. But as I said, yeah, with Russell, it feels like he did it just to make sure it doesn't go off the air, and the way it's progressing as with this era and even with Jodie's era, it's becoming like how I said how Doctor Who was in the 80s, where it's been like, oh, it's another season with another Doctor. It's losing its touch, and as I said, it just needs a fresh start.
Yeah. That's it. It just needs a fresh start, but it doesn't really feel like that's what's going to happen. I mean, Russell's been working on it for about 4 years now. If you think about when he joined, well, they announced it in September 2021, and I think he'd started before then. So his first year, he was only working on the show for about 5.5 or 6 years. So he's already 4 years in this time. So maybe he's not that far away from giving it up. But also, he's got to find somebody to take it over. Which I know there's some people putting their hats in the ring or whatever, but I do feel like one of the issues at the end of the Chibnall era was a lack of anybody else who wanted to do it and was willing to take it on because of how much the role entails, and kind of you've got to be the sort of almost the ambassador or the brand ambassador of the whole show, like the whole Doctor Who universe. Like you've got to be quite a big character and personality to kind of carry that, which I feel like maybe Chris Chibnall wasn't always that as much. Just as a person, I don't think he's as outgoing and charismatic as Russell is. Like Russell is in an element kind of promoting the show in kind of the way JNT was back in the day, whereas I don't think Chibnall was that as much. So I don't think it's an easy role to fill as well, which probably also presents them with challenges when thinking about the future. But ultimately they just need to nail down some new Doctor Who, because I agree. I think, Charlie, you said there is not really a benefit for the show going in hiatus. Like, I think we're being a little bit too naive as Doctor Who fans if we think it's okay for the show to go off the air for 5 years and then it'll just magically turn up again in 5 years' time. Like, that's not going to happen, realistically. Sure, Big Finish will carry on and the books will carry on, but doesn't mean the TV show is just going to turn up again in 5 years' time. So I think we need to be realistic about that. Well, let's kind of bring this episode into land. So, Charlie, I'll come to you first for sort of, I guess, a final thought on the Ncuti Gatwa era as a whole. I think we've kind of summed it up with good, but it could have been so much better. Is there much more to add than that?
I mean, we've said it all, really. Yeah, good, but could have been so much better. As a whole, I mean, it's so difficult to talk about because it's only 21 episodes, which is like, it's so just little, I mean, obviously including the 60th, the RTD2 so far is 21 episodes. It's better than Chibnall. I mean, that's what I can say about it. It is better than Chibnall, where I don't want to say it's been on a downward slope, but I feel like on average, the 10th Doctor's era was worse than the 9th. Purely because 9 didn't have as much, the average quality was higher because he only had 13 episodes and there was less opportunities to be bad. 11's was somewhat worse than 10's, 12's was kind of on the same level for me, and then Chibnall's was worse. So it's kind of been on a downward trajectory.
Okay.
And this has been better than Chibnall. And I've got to give it credit for that. It really isn't as bad as what lots of people are kind of making it out to be since the reality war. We do have some pretty good Doctor Who, and we have had it in the last 18 months, but the problem is it's over after 18 months. And the amount of time between Ncuti's announcement and his first episode is actually longer than the length of time from his first episode to his last.
Exactly.
We have more time with him having 0 episodes than him having any episodes, which is crazy. Which is just crazy. But I mean, it's not the sort of thing you can really give a number out of 10 to the way you can an episode.
I agree.
I might as well rattle off my my ranking of RTD2 just because I've got it sat here for the last hour and a bit. Space Babies, Legend of Ruby Sunday, Empire of Death, Wishworld, Reality War. They're the bad ones.
Yeah.
Devil's Cord, Joy to the World, Church from Ruby Road, Story in the Engine, Robot Revolution, Star Beast, Dot and Bubble, Rogue. They're sort of okay. Lucky Day, Boom, Lux, The Giggle, Interstellar Song Contest. Yes. Wildly Yonder, The Well, 73 Yards.
It's a good list.
I love the Interstellar Song Contest, and I know you don't as much, Ryan. I feel like there are about 200 Doctor Who episodes I would compare it to before Kill the Moon. But I mean, that's just me. I like this episode a weird amount and didn't like the Story in the Engine a whole lot. I mean, it's basically exactly in the middle. It's towards the bottom in my ranking, actually. But it's just a whole lot of pretty good episodes, just kind of made bad by the fact that the starts of the seasons and the ends of the seasons are just not very good at all. And if you have these first episodes make casual viewers switch off, and you have these last episodes which make fans not like the show and leaves a bad taste in their mouth. You can have as many good episodes in the middle as you want, but if you have these awful bookends, it's a shame. So yeah, I mean, end of story. It's good, but it could have been so much better with more control, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Absolutely. No, that's really, really good. Bill, I'll come to you for your kind of final thoughts on the whole era.
Yeah, I would say it's there are positives to it, and I feel like that like we have stated that, but I feel like that's worth kind of reiterating like again, is like there have been really standout moments, have been some really standout episodes that I think genuinely are like in consideration for being like the top 100 of Doctor Who stories. I think that's fair to say.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like as a purely on a like a as a pure if you were outlining it as like a pure pitch document or pure like whatever,
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't necessarily sound bad. It's just more the execution and the general just I suppose the fact that ultimately its fate is it wasn't really as good as it like we were led to believe this was going to be the big relaunch of the show
Yeah.
like back in 22, 23.
Yeah.
And now looking back on it these years later, it doesn't really feel like it was that. Like it felt like it was kind of trying to do that with most of season one, with pretty good like results for most part. Um, but then yeah, kind of like Empire of Death onwards, I feel like it starts to get a lot more introspective again. It's a lot more about, oh, we've got to have lore dumps, we've got to have, all kinds of canon explanations, continuity references, and to generate, content and clicks and all this lot. And just, it's a shame because I feel like on paper, this era could have been really good. And I feel like it could have been that big relaunch that the show
Yeah.
definitely needed back in 22 and needs even more so 3 years later now.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's a shame because I can see what Russell was trying to do with some of it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, all of it on paper sounds pretty good for most part, like wanting God characters as the main villains, wanting this more fantasy themes direction, wanting the occasional like musical number, wanting a lot more experimentation in general. I feel like on paper, all of that sounds great. And you think, well, that's really interesting kind of news
Hmm.
territory for Doctor Who. But then it just seems like ultimately it's back to what series 12 and 13 were doing, where it was just like, we need to look way back to 50 or 60 years in the past and explain all that stuff from so long ago that only the most like really like faithful Doctor Who fan is really going to care about. Like, yeah, it's a shame because there is so much potential there and you've got great talent as well. As I said earlier, like with Ncuti, Millie, Vrada, even the guest cast. There's just so much that could have been done with it. Like we've had Neil Patrick Harris as a toy maker.
Yeah.
We've had Jonathan Groff as a romantic interest for the Doctor. We've had amazing, like big stars in Doctor Who, and yet, like it feels like we should be making like a more positive, bigger deal out of it. But it's kind
Yeah.
of hard to at this point. Like it's just like it felt like when it was like Neil Patrick Harris, like Miriam Margolyes, all that kind of stuff, it felt like, oh, this is Doctor Who getting big again because big names want to work,
Yeah.
on it again.
Exactly.
And now it's just like that that's just the fact that's just completely forgotten about. And that's just a real shame, I think. Yeah, I hope Shooty does do at least Big Finish sometime in the future because it feels like there's so much potential left for the 15th Doctor, and um, yeah, there's just like I feel like even 13th Doctor, like we got more of an inkling of what she was like as a Doctor, than we did with the 15th because at least she had a longer tenure. Yes, it was 3 seasons over 5 years, but it was still something.
Yeah.
Whereas with Shooty, like he's a great actor, and I understand why he chose to leave. Like I would be tempted to make the same decision in his situation, but it just feels like his Doctor could have been so much more, and yeah, it just. I feel like Russell is also just writing still with that 13 episode format in mind, rather than really trying to tailor it to better suit 8 episodes. It just seems like you either pick one or the other. Like you either go the full hog, and have 13 episodes again, or you just tailor your writing to fit the 8 episodes that you've got, or 10 episodes, or whatever. And it's just a shame that instead we've kind of got this weird mishmash, I suppose, where it's like, yeah, it's just as near it. It is so all over the place. There is full of potential, full of really great ideas, certainly in there, and really great episodes with standout moments, but also just ultimately it doesn't quite come together. And
Yeah.
yeah, the stars just weren't aligned properly, I guess, for it.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with everything you say, really, to be honest. And well, Ryan, we'll come to you for the final thought on the Ncuti Gatwa era. How are you leaving these last 2 years feeling?
Like I said, waste of potential, just like it was with Colin Baker, just like it was with Jodie Whittaker. It just feels like there was so much riding on this to be good. Like so many, like Russell coming back, having this this statement of it's going to be a fresh launch for the show, um, where you're establishing more obscure villains rather than having to rely on more well-known ones like the Daleks and so forth. And it does feel, and getting big names involved like Neil Patrick Harris and so forth, and even getting Gabriel Wolf back as Sutek. It did sound like a lot was going for it, but yeah, as they said, whether it's you know problems behind the scenes, the Disney deal, some of Russell's ideas being way too out there. Um, I mean, who can forget what happened with Omega? I mean, I'm never going to forget that. Um, it does feel like it had the potential to be so much more than it was. And we see in stories like Boom and 73 Yards, Dot and Bubble, that it can be that. It could be so much more. If they had that quality, that consistent quality from beginning to end, we could have had another golden age to talk about. We could have,
Yeah.
and and as I said before, I like Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor. I like Millie Gibson and Vara DeSeta as the companions, and they all deserved so much better than this. And some of the ideas they whether making the season shorter, the story arcs, what the finales, especially the one from the Wish War, the reality war, it just feels like it wasn't. And even starting off your era with singing goblins and talking babies, it didn't feel properly thought out as perhaps it should have been. And again, I keep bringing up Jurassic Park, that quote again. It spent so much time thinking whether or not they could. They didn't stop to think if they should. And that's just kind of how I felt looking at all this. And if the finale, and speaking of which, if they did a finale and it was kind of like a Doctor Who version of Jurassic Park, I would watch that in a heartbeat. That sounds like a much better idea than whatever the hell we got with
Yeah.
Wish World and the Reality War. And looking at the stories, I've done my ranking here, the top
Yeah.
16. Number 16, Wish World and the Reality War. No
Yeah.
surprises there. 15, Space Babies. Those are the two that I would say are absolutely bad. I mean, that the two-part finale especially. Um, Number 14, Revolution. 13, Church on Ruby Road. Um, 12, Interstellar Song Contest. 11, Legend of Ruby Sunday, Empire of Death. Those are the ones that I would say are average to passable at
Yeah.
very best. Those are the ones. The top 10, I would say, top 10 onwards, I would definitely say are pretty damn solid to phenomenal. Number 10, Joy to the World. 9, Rogue. 8, Lucky Day. 7, The Devil's Cord. 6, The Well. 5, Lux. 4, The Story and the Engine.
Yeah.
3, Dot and Bubble. 2, 73 Yards. And number 1, Boom. Of course, it's going to be Boom. It's,
yeah.
I mean, sometimes I do go back and forth whether it's that or 73 Yards, but I think Boom stood out the most because it did feel like, okay, this is where this has the potential to be really good, and it gave me a lot of hope. And I feel like it's one of Ncuti Gatwa's best performance. He even says it's his favourite story that he's done, and you can definitely see why. Although, again, 73 Yards is a very close second place. It's a good one as well because that was the story where I still remember coming away from 73 Yards, just pacing around the house for about an hour, just thinking about what I saw. And I was like, that is an experience that I've had that I probably will never have again. That's how I felt with 73 Yards, because it was such a unusual experience, an unforgettable experience that I just absolutely loved. But Boom, I think I just loved Boom the most because, as I said, it had a tight story, really high stakes despite it being in one location, and just the cast firing on all cylinders, and Moffat still proving that he had it. He still has it, even after all this time. And yeah, as I said, there is definitely some positives to be found there, a lot of positives, but it's just a shame that not all of it could have been brought into a complete, fully satisfying way. And as I said, just like with Colin Baker, like with Jodie Whittaker, it just felt like a lot of wasted potential, a lot of missed potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Unfortunately, I think that is the defining note that we've reached on this era is missed potential, wasted potential. There's a lot of good. There really is a lot of good. There's a lot of good episodes of Doctor Who in this era. But ultimately, it will always feel like it could have been better. It could have been more. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure in a few years' time we'll come back to this era and think about it again. And maybe by then our opinions will have changed a little bit. We'll know what's happened in the future of the show, and maybe it will reframe our perspective a little bit. But for now, I think that is where we leave it. And so we're going to leave this era for a while now, and focus on things from the past, get back to the roots of this podcast, I would maybe call it. In the next episode, we'll be discussing the animation of The Savages, which came out, I think, in February or March this year. But we obviously have been focusing on season 2, so I haven't had a chance to talk about it. So do join us in the next episode in a few weeks' time, where we'll be chatting all about that story, the animation, the documentaries, including a 1.5 hour documentary on the making of the story, which I haven't watched yet, but I've heard is quite good and is intriguing for an episode that doesn't exist at all. So do join us again for that in a few weeks' time. But for now, from me, from Ryan, from Bill, and from Charlie, it is goodbye.